The other thing I've gotten from a lot of listeners, from a lot of readers at The Resurgent, from people on Facebook, Twitter, social media, and email is, what the hell is happening? I mean, this seems to be the prevailing question from a lot of people, is what on earth is going on right now? It seems like there's something in the water. People have lost their freaking minds. And I want to see if I can explain to you what that is, because I've got a theory, and mine is not the only theory, but I think mine is headed in the right direction, if not right altogether. What we're seeing is people's response to uncertainty, to the great unknown. What we are seeing, if you will, is people standing up and trying to replace the Grand Sez Who. Now, the Grand Sez Who in the past has been God. This was a term coined by Arthur Leff. Arthur Leff, the philosopher, lawyer, I think at Yale or Princeton, he said at some point someone's going to stand up in the absence of God, and we'll call him the Grand Sez Who. Someone will say, says who? And people now, in the uncertainty, as Western civilization has always been foundationally premised on the existence of a higher power, Western civilization really has been premised on a Judeo-Christian background. And for the last 100 years, 150 years, but really in the last 50 years, there's been an escalation post-World War II of people trying to undermine the foundational base of Western civilization, that being the Judeo-Christian heritage of the West. And essentially, Adolf Hitler may have lost the war, but the long-term strategy of wiping the Judeo-Christian foundation of Western civilization out, he and Lenin together in concert push this, and they're winning that. And they're winning it with the rise of secularism from the 60s and 70s, the war in Vietnam, the war in Korea, turning people against authority, turning people against the powers and plays that were put in place after World War II. And now we've arrived at the moment where people are trying to fight out who says who. Who gets to be the authority? There is a great unknown and an uncertainty, and it is most common on the left, though not exclusively on the left. And so, in the absence of a Judeo-Christian God and a Ten Commandments of what sets forth right and wrong, you've got people who are walking further back into Genesis. You know, in Genesis, God creates man, male and female, and that is the worldview of several millennia. Well, now God no longer just creates male and female. God creates men, women, transgender. He makes us gay or straight. They are essentially, we're reverting to a level of Pelagianism. Pelagian, it was the monk from England who thought there was no such thing as original sin. He was rebutted by Augustine and the Western Church. Pelagianism is a heresy. But you've now got this idea that we are born in a certain way. We're defined by who we are at birth, whether it's gay or straight, and therefore that can't be right or wrong because God made us that way. No, we're made in the image of God, but we are sinners and we're born with sin. What the natural world is trying to do, the secular world is trying to do, is wrestle with this prevailing foundational bit of Western thought as to who we are. How are we born? Into what values are we born? And the left would have you believe that there's a blank slate, that there is no original sin, there's a blank slate, but you are born gay, straight, transgender, what have you. Now, when you layer on top of that comes morality, and this is where things get dicey, and what we're seeing right now with Google, what we're seeing with the resistance marches against the president, what we're seeing with the left-wing hostility towards conservative culture in the country. What we're seeing are a group of people trying to stake themselves out as the Grand Sez Who. Politics in this country prior to the 21st century was viewed as a way of governing the country. But politics in the 21st century, in the absence of an all-powerful God, politics becomes power. And whoever controls politics controls the power in the country. So there's a huge fight, not over religion now, but over politics, because politics has become the religion. In the absence of an almighty, a secular world views politics as the way to implement the divine. So all of these things become worth fighting over. Why? Because in secular Western thought, what is there after death? There's nothing. So what is there in life? There's evolution. And what is a central part of evolution? Natural selection. And what is a part of natural selection? Survival of the fittest. Well, that doesn't ring true to the left. The left has this overarching moralistic view that we've got to help everybody. The survival of the fittest is bad. But that's where their logical framework comes from. So the left now has to build foundationally a moralism on top of survival of the fittest. And so what they've done is they've decided that white men are considered the fittest, and therefore they would survive, and therefore everything in society morality-wise must go to tap down on white men. And the further down the totem pole you are from white men, the closer you are to the divine. So the one-legged hermaphroditic black lesbian of Asian descent reigns supreme. And no one's allowed to question this person, because this person, by virtue of birth status, remember, we're no longer created in the image of God, we're created in the image of our sin. This person's birth status gives that person a touch of the divine. Not all of us are created in the image of God. This person is, by virtue of being as far removed from the fittest in society that the left conjures up, which is the white male. We have to, again, in the absence of God, it's survival of the fittest, but the left, that's anathema to them. They've got to come up with a way to replace it. And so they've replaced it with diversity and multiculturalism and tolerance and all of these other layers of moralism on top of evolution. And what we're seeing in life now, what we're seeing with the Google fight, what we're seeing with the resistance, what we're seeing with the left up in arms about transgenderism, the need to put men in girls' bathrooms, the need to fight the president, the need to stand with anyone who's opposed to Trump, all of these things is the left now trying to find a way to make politics religion and find a morality in the West that can supplant Western traditional Judeo-Christian morality. That's what's going on here. That's why everything is a hill to die on. That's why people are so upset on the left. That's why there are so many people on the left who believe that you're not a political opponent anymore. You are evil and worth being cast out of society, worth being silenced in some cases, if you're James Hodgkinson, worth being killed because you stand in the way of this new morality, this new religion, the new Grand Sez Who. They want to be the Grand Sez Who. The mob. But if you're on the right, don't pat yourself on the back smugly, because there are a lot of people on the right who have traded God for a president. They've traded a divine savior for a political figure in Washington. They think God and Jesus can't save them, only Donald Trump can save them. And they're willing to smite their enemies just as much as the left is willing to smite their enemies. They're willing to use the power of government to go after the other side, and they're willing to adopt the other side's rules and behaviors, because they still give superficial lip service to the divine, but there are a lot of people on the right who don't believe it either anymore.